Hey, and welcome to Glue Monday. If you're watching the broadcast, that's what it is, Monday. And I always start my messages off a couple of minutes in advance. So to give the Facebook a chance to what they call build the audience. And I always explain that because there are a couple of schools of thought. Some people say you shouldn't start until you're ready to start. But I say start a few minutes earlier. So because someone could be anticipating you coming on, but they may be doing something else. And so therefore, when you come on, they're like, oh, so-and-so's on. And so, and then but I got to finish this up. And so so that's why I always come on early to give the people who are watching the broadcast live a chance to get caught up real quick and get in there. Oh my God, Vic is on. Vic is on first. Shout out. And then so I can give my shout outs too. We got less than 2 minutes before we get into today's message. But yeah, that's those are the couple of reasons. So, just giving you, that's a technology tip because, we have to keep thinking of ways to make technology work for us and then find ways for us to work with technology. So it's important. So, you figure out what your school of thought is, whether or not you should come on in advance or you should come on at the minute that you start. But I believe you should come on in advance and give it a chance. See, and I get to get a couple of comments from my homeboy Vic as he loads up the chat, because it could just be me and Vic on the live, right? And then you joining us in on the broadcast. But that's what it's all about. So let's get down with today's message, okay? Because it's 1 o'clock on the dot here in terms of live. And what I want to talk about today, is there are two concepts that have been coming across my path over the last couple of weeks that I thought would be important for me to talk about. The last couple of weeks, these two different concepts. The first concept is what I call, and I've named, the 3 R's. And the 3 R's, not reading, writing, and arithmetic, but I use them when I'm speaking. And the 3 R's are the research, the real stuff, and the resource. And what I'm saying about that is, when we're presenting, we're giving the research. That's what you may see on the screen. And let me put an asterisk there and a caveat, because so often we get caught up in cliches, and we let ourselves believe what somebody else believes, and it adds to our stress in some ways. Because haven't you heard somebody say, "Oh man, I don't want to do death by PowerPoint," and so now that becomes the cliche and the standard for PowerPoint slides, when in fact, everyone has a different learning style. So therefore, there are people who really need you. So if you're going to be the presenter, there are people who need you to do slides. And therefore, what I say to you is create breath by PowerPoint. Because people aren't upset about the fact that you have slides. People get upset about the way you use your slides. So why don't you, as a speaker, as a presenter, have the mentality of breath by PowerPoint. You're going to help people breathe easily. You're going to help them enjoy seeing something so that they can learn, because visual learners need you to have that slide. You've got auditory learners, you've got visual learners, okay, and then you've got people who need to be interactive. So a lot of different ways. So anyway, I always believe in that. So the 3 R's, the research, and that's what's on the slides, and then the real stuff. Because see, sometimes research is, I always say it's like Maury, right? You are not the father, right? So what's the real thing? The research is there saying this is what we were looking at. X amount of people were surveyed. But what about the real stuff? What's going on in your life according to what's happening with the research? What's going on in your life according to what's happening with the research? And that's something that you do get to control. So you've got the research, then you've got the real stuff. Now, if the research doesn't work for you, if what they're saying about 100 people were surveyed and this is what they say, we like it when we see it on Family Feud, 100 people were surveyed, this is what they say, number one answer is, we get excited about that. It's the same thing. That's what the research can be. And so if it works for you, you say, yes, that's true. Or you say, that ain't true about me. Oh, this is crap. No. It's not true about you. Congratulations that you know enough about yourself that you know what does not apply to you, because that's always going to be the bottom line. One of the bottom lines of my message is that we have to recognize who we are. Once we know who we are, then we know where we fit and we know what fits with us. But notice we come first. You have to let things fit for you. Okay. And then we got a little shout out there. What's up, Vincent? All right. Good stuff. And all right. Yeah. And see, right at the beginning, isn't that one of the things that you want to do is open up with good stuff? And so, meanwhile, I'm going to just do one little shout out fast forward that's not in today's message, but one that I love to talk about, and that's stuff. STUFF. Situations that unleash our focus and faith. Stuff happens. We've got things that go on in our lives that make us really focus on who am I, and then we have the faith to go through with being who we are. And so it relates to this message. That's also why I shout it out, though it's not in my specific message today. And that's one of the things I enjoy about doing these broadcasts, by the way, is also to get the interaction, the back and forth, just have a good time. You know me, I'm gonna have a good time. All right. But getting back to what I was saying, so you've got the research, you've got the real stuff. If it doesn't apply to you, at least you say, okay, well, that's what the norm is. But here's what I do. Because that's really what you want to look for. It's what do I do? When you're looking for a partner, whether it's in a business or a social or a romantic relationship, whichever one it is, right? What do you look for? You look for someone who has the same interests of you. But what are you also looking for? The diamond in the rough. The diamond in the rough. The needle in the haystack, the exception to the rule. You're not looking for what everybody else has. You're looking for your partner. And again, that can be in your social business or business relationship. You're looking for the right fit for you and be a person that you can work with if it's a business relationship. If a romantic relationship, a person that you want to go through some stuff with, because a relationship, a personal relationship is going to be some stuff. Marriage is not an easy thing. Hats off and congratulations and blessings to those of you who are still married and those of you who had tried marriage and maybe it didn't work, but you didn't give up on life. And I hope you didn't give up on the friendship that you gained with that relationship. But sometimes it happens. Hey, it's not TV. We don't always have a happy ending. So we got the research, the real stuff, and then the third R is the resource. The resource is where you're getting your message from, where you're getting your research from, how you're connecting with your real stuff. Well, that's the resource. Who's your messenger, in other words? Who's your messenger? Where are you getting this connection from that equals the beautiful connection that you have come, that what you've come to add to our world? And the reason that has been coming up for me, I just got back to doing live presentations with the Army. I just did this one this weekend. And that's what I say to them. I say, look, my slides are the research. The real stuff is what's going on in your life. And I want you to allow me to be a resource for you because you're getting this information from me. And if there's a way I can help you use it or find a better way to spin it for you, I want to be here for you to do that. And that's what you are doing as well. You are someone's messenger. You're someone's resource. Number one, you always know I say, choose your messengers carefully and recognize that you're being carefully chosen as a messenger. So when you are committed to being who you are and true to yourself, then that message gets transferred to someone else. Because haven't you said, oh, I want to be like someone so and so? Don't we all have mentors or idols, athletes, musicians, movie stars, someone who's, I want to do that. So if they are in place of really being who they are, they're giving you something real to shoot for. And that's the same thing you get to do because there's someone checking you out that's wishing that that they could, emulate what you have because they appreciate what you have. Now, I didn't know Geraldine was on there, but fam, because I didn't see her. Oh, there she goes. All right. See, y'all know I like to tell you that there's a time delay on that's why you see me looking over here because I'm also on my other computer so I can try to be live with y'all and slow down every now and then and answer questions. But the computer that I'm broadcasting from has a time delay. And, so therefore, I don't always know what the comments are referring to. So we're all good. It's all good and we're all good. All right. So, yeah, what's happening, Geraldine family? All right. I'm gonna get on now with the message because so that's one thing that has been coming up, the 3 R's. Here's the second thing, though. And I've said it to a couple of people. I said, especially as an entrepreneur, you have to be careful and wary of every now and then being the smartest person that you know. Sometimes you can be the smartest person you know and not know enough to realize that you need to ask for help, get someone else's advice. So, with those two things on my mind and in my heart, that's what I'm coming to you today with today's message of test versus tempt. And when I started out, when I first came up to it, I want to have this message in my mind. I got to tell you this, I was thinking, I was just giving you half a word, test and tempt. And then I was going to add testimony, temptation. But then what I started to do, I started researching to see about putting them together. And I started looking at it a different way. And that's when that second part came to me about don't be the smartest person you know. So I decided that what I want to do on this broadcast, I want to show you what I did with some of my research. And I'm going to actually read synopsize. I want to mostly read, but I got some points that I can make in between an article that I found by a guy named Pastor Chris Bass, and I want to hit the link in the feed so you can always see it another time, because I want to say, this is, what I'm doing is I did some research and I want to let somebody else talk. I want you to get this message from somebody else who you can see is, in this case, he's being one of my messengers, because, I really appreciated the message that I got from reading this article. And so we can make some connecting points to it. So it's in a blog that he did. And the blog is, what is it? It was called Testing or Temptation. That's why I was like, oh, this is cool. It's right there with what I'm looking for. So that's a link to the full article, but I'm actually going to share it with you right now and read it pretty much from his words. So I want to start out by saying that what he says is that temptation is the pressure to give in to ungod. I want to say something before I get into his article. I want to my contrast of the two, and that is temptations come from ungodly sources and are designed to cause believers to fall away from their relationship with God. Temptations come from ungodly sources and are designed to cause believers to fall away from their relationship with God. Testing, on the other hand, comes from God and is designed to help you or show you your dependence on God, as well as bring you closer to him. So testing comes from God and is designed to help or show you your dependence on God, your wonderful dependence on God, as well as bring you closer to him. So that was what I first found. And then Pastor Chris Bass's article makes the argument for those two sentences, the difference or the relationship of temptations versus testings. So what he said is that, first of all, temptation is the pressure to give in to ungodly influences that lead you away from God and into sin. It is not a sin to be tempted. It is the succumbing to the temptation that causes us to sin. The Bible teaches that all people will be tempted. We are all given many examples of people who have been tempted and have given in. And we are given examples of people who held out. Some examples of those who gave in include Adam and Eve in Genesis 3:3-7, David in 2 Samuel 11:2-4. That was when he stayed back from the war and he saw Bathsheba from his roof and decided that he was going to be an adulterer. And so he had Bathsheba come to his room, and he ended up getting her pregnant. And so then that led to him therefore being a murderer, because then he had her husband Uriah moved to the front line of the battle so that he could be killed. And what he was looking to do with that is, by having her husband killed, now he would have been able to therefore bring her in as one of his queens, or a concubine back at the time, and he would have been able to legitimately show that in that time frame that she was pregnant from him, just because it's in that same time frame. You see where that was going? So that was his whole mindset. So he went double. He was an adulterer. He let that adultery move him into being a murderer, and he had to do some conniving and cheating in there and lying to try to get that to happen. So that's where that comes from. So that's an example of someone who gave in. Hey, what's up, Bruce? All right. I give my shout outs to my people as they come in. I appreciate y'all. All right. So what's up, Bruce? But okay, and then another example, Peter in Matthew 26:69 through 75. That's where he denied Jesus 3 times before the cock crowed, when he was following Jesus. So those are examples of people who have given in. And so we say that, you say, guess what? You got some pretty good company of people that you give in for, that have given in terms of sin. And so that's what he said. So if you're feeling like you're the only one who gives in to temptation, you should know that you're in some pretty good company. And then he says, these are the sources of temptation. Temptation comes from all kinds of places, but not from God. No one undergoing a trial would say, I am being tempted by God, since God is not tempted by evil, and he himself doesn't tempt anyone else. And that's James 1:13. And James goes on to say, at some point, some of our sin comes from within our own nature. Some of our sin comes from within our own nature. In James 1:14 through 15. I'm sorry, let me go back by one step there, because I didn't make that clear. That's James 1:13. No one undergoing a trial should say, I am being tempted by God, since God is not tempted by evil, and he himself doesn't tempt anyone. That's James 1:13. Then he goes on to say in 1:14 through 15, but each person is tempted when he is drawn away and enticed by his own evil desire. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is fully grown, it gives birth to death. And see, so now you can see how that connects a little bit to what David was doing. His desire was conceived that he wanted Bathsheba, and then that gave birth to sin. Once he became the adulterer with her, now that moved him to becoming a murderer. Okay, so that's why sometimes to show that sometimes our sin come from within our own sinful nature. And then the article says the internal struggle with sin in our flesh is the main source of temptation in our lives. And the whole chapter in Romans 7, where Paul talks about his own struggle with sin and temptation. I'm not going to read it to you, but what I am going to say to you is that that's a good place for you to check that out and see, how Paul talks about his struggle with sin, because he didn't just tell people you need to do this. Remember, Paul in Romans, Paul was in jail. And so he was in jail for following Christ. And so as he, even from the jail cell, he still was preaching the word of salvation. And so that's what he talked about. He admitted, yes, I have struggled with sin, but because I accept my struggle, and I'm looking for the testimony. See, that was why I put testing with temptation. That is the journey that he would prefer us to be on and encourage us to be on. So let me slow down and see if we got any comments in there that I need to address. And there being none, I'm doing good. Hey, what's up, Allison? My wife and home girl. Good to see you. All right, good to see you. Okay, so. And then Chris goes on to say that temptation sometimes comes from other people. See, so that one was saying that sin comes from within our own sinful nature, temptation, but sometimes it comes from other people. And how he does that? Well, Peter describes it in 2 Peter 2:18. Peter says, for by uttering boastful, empty words, they seduce with fleshly desires and debauchery people who have barely escaped from those who live in error. Solomon warns his son. Okay, and that's in 2 Peter 2:18. I'm sorry, I didn't put the punctuation there, but in 2 Peter 2:18, Peter says, for by uttering boastful, empty words, this is temptation coming from other people, they seduce you. Bold, empty words can seduce you with fleshly desires and debauchery. People who have barely escaped from those live in error. And so that's when somebody is, trying to talk you into something. And so you have to be really conscious. There goes why it shows you have to choose your messengers carefully. And then he says in Proverbs 5:3-6, not Paul, excuse me, not Peter, but Solomon. Solomon, who is the child that was born from that sin that David had. Bathsheba was Solomon's mother. But Solomon warns his son against the seduction of the forbidden woman whose lips drip with honey. That's in Proverbs 5:3-6. And Proverbs has it's not a storyline, it's just a lot of good singers. Boom, you need to believe this and understand this. So that's what's really great about Proverbs. Also, I'm not looking to start a fight here. This is what what Pastor Chris Bass says. I'm not looking to start a fight here, but Eve did hand Adam the apple in Genesis 3:6. So sometimes temptations comes from other people, not necessarily of our own doing. Excuse me. And then finally, while most of our temptations, this is back to the article, comes from, ooh, let's take a break. I get all choked up talking about it, I guess. But what he's saying is while most of our temptations come from one or two, either from other people or from within, there are times where we are tempted by Satan himself or one of his followers. Again, choosing our messengers carefully, because we don't know if the false messengers are, what they're doing. Oh, we're going to give laugh out loud on Eve. I ain't mad at you. And then thank you for the blessing. I appreciate it. That's the joke in the pandemic, right? When people sneeze, we always just say, bless you. Now, when people sneeze, we say, get away from me. All right. Excuse me. So let's move on with the message. But sometimes Satan or one of his followers is the person who's tempting us. We see this type of temptations in a few places in Scripture. And once again, Adam and Eve, Job, Jesus, Paul, etc. But the typical verse that we point to is from 1 Corinthians 7:5. In that passage, Paul warns married couples from abstaining from each other too long, so that Satan will not tempt them to be unfaithful to their spouse, since they lack self-control. And that's something that I don't think people talk about enough. The Bible is not against sex. The Bible, it talks about the proper time and allocation of sex. And I know our society is doesn't look down on premarital sex, and neither do I. But what the Bible does is also says, hey, you're married and your bodies belong to one another. Don't deny one another the pleasures of your relationship. That's what sometimes will make one partner stray. And I put sometimes because, I haven't been married, and I can't say I can get into the head of people who've been married and why they've decided to wander and move out on their spouse, So, but hey, again, if we think about it, nobody's wrong, but you want to acknowledge and look at these things and see how they apply to you and if it makes a difference. And if you just joined us, by the way, Pastor Chris Bass is the author of the article that I'm reading right now. I just thought about that. I don't want people to think that this is Pastor Chris Bass, but I want to give him credit because one thing I don't believe in doing is saying, hey, I came up with this. I'm pretty much reading his article to you because I want him to be the messenger today. That becomes a part of the message that I always deliver is choose your messengers carefully and then share the message. You don't have to take credit for it. I heard, somebody said to me a few weeks ago, I said something, I said, oh, that's good. And I want to, who's if I want to give them credit? They say, hey, well, what they say, after you say it 3 times, it's yours. I said, I've heard the cliche, but I don't use that, in the speaking world, and that's like a joke. It's an internal joke in the speaker's world. But I believe that the joke it only comes when you're saying it to the person whose quote you're going to be using. And then you should be saying it as a joke. So if I'm going to use your line, I'll say, yeah, but after I use it 3 times, it's mine. And that should be a joke. because I should always make sure that I credit who my source is. And you too funny, Vic. I'm gonna put that up there. But now, just since you have to be a smart aleck, I'm gonna say, see, you didn't even you getting hooked on phonics. You spelled pastor wrong. All right, my brother. So anyway, so yeah, so this is Pastor Chris Bass. This is an article that I got from him, and I just love how it connects to what I believe and what I share with you anyway, which is where this whole thing is coming to a head with as we move on. But so married couples, please work on your marriage. I just spoke with the South Carolina National Guard this weekend, and I one of the things I said, especially if you've married young, it can be tough. Deployment, because separation from the family at a young age where you don't have a whole lot of buy-in to the marriage, you haven't been married that long, it can be difficult. So help our young people that are in relationships. Help them be committed. They've made this choice. Now help them find a way to stick to the choice. It's a tough situation, because there's a fine line between hanging in there and being in an abusive relationship. But you choose your partner carefully as well. So it's a lot of stuff going on, y'all. It's a lot of stuff, and it's not all pandemic related. Life is a tough thing, and we got to give ourselves credit. That was the stuff Vincent mentioned earlier. We got to give ourselves credit for being able to go through life and to make these decisions, because that's what stuff is. It unleashes our focus and faith. It helps us make a decision about what our next step is, and that could be the decision that changes your life forever for the good, because we want to focus on what the good is. All right. So moving on to article, he says, married couple, do not deprive one another except when you agree for a time to devote yourself to prayer. If you decide, well, we're going to abstain for X amount of time, then you agree to it, but then come together again. Otherwise, Satan may tempt you because of your lack of self-control. So that's a good message, from a single person to married people, is that, make sure that that's the communication part. Let one another know what you're going through and how you're feeling. No feeling is wrong. No emotion is wrong, but you want to be able to discuss them. And you got a partner right now. If you're sequestered in the house type of thing, well, come on, don't get him. Oh man, I'm in here with him or her. This could be a time and a chance for you to create some new traditions. And even if you're not married, if you're just in, living with your family, whether it's your extended family, however, y'all, let's find ways to commit to the people who we are committed to and make our lives go better. And then he goes on the article to say other sources of temptations, the world. The world in 1 John 2:16, the love of money is a source of temptations. 1 Timothy 6:9-10. The love of power, Deuteronomy 8:17-18. Lust, Proverbs 6:25, as well as 7:21, and pride, Proverbs 11:2. And whenever I see that one about pride, I always remember one of my favorite movies, Devil's Advocate, where what's his name? Not Robert De Niro, Al Pacino is the devil. And he said, that's one of my favorite sins, pride. Because see, your pride will make you do things and make you discount people who you should bring into your life and push them out. And that goes back to what I was saying about how this article resonated with me. Don't be the smartest person that you know. Or when you get to that spot, try not to stay there. Be smart enough to know that you are not in this alone and you can't do it alone. And when I was talking to my soldiers yesterday, that's what I was saying to them, is that, you have to be comfortable asking for help. It's a tough thing to do, but you've earned it. And any of you who have military relatives or military friends, come on, let's not just make it a cliche talking about thank you for their service. And, but let's really find ways to help them to continue their service, because it is unselfish what they've done. And so what you got there, Vic, money is the root of all evil. All right. So really focus that, because money can be the root of all evil, but it can be a source of great blessing. Because the key is, what are you doing with your money? How did you get your money? See, so there's a lot of things we have to consider and think about, and that's something that you want to do. So, sources of temptations: the world, the love of money, power, lust, and pride. But let's close it out. But let's walk down to some of the good stuff about it. And in the article, because he didn't just make it a doom and gloom thing, he also talked about the fact that there's how we can have victory over temptations. And he says, because being tempted is not a sin. Sin is what happens when someone gives into temptation. See, so we got to go. See, I open with the bad. Temptation is real. But let's close out with how we can beat temptation. Let's get the victory. Temptation is not a sin. You will be tempted. You will be tempted to do several things. You have been. Have you stopped to give yourself credit for some of those temptations that you turned down? They don't have to be monumental. It could have been some small things. One person stole something and you decided not to steal. There's a lot of small things. One person I can't think of any right now. So let's take our time and think of something. All right, but that's what he said. Over and over, the Bible challenges followers of Jesus to resist temptation and gives us what we need to overcome the temptations that we face. So one final reminder, he says, is that everyone will have different things that they are tempted by. One might be tempted to steal. Oh, see there, I had it. And another may have no desire to do so. Instead, they may struggle with foul language. I turn to 3 passages in the Bible when I need encouragement to overcome temptation. First, Romans 8:35 through 37. Can anything ever separate us from Christ's love? No. In all these things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. Romans 8:35 through 37. And then James 1:12. Blessed is the one who endures trials, because when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. That's James 1:12. And then finally, 1 John 4:4. You are from God, little children, and you have conquered them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. So these are 3 passages that he says encourage him to overcome temptation. Perhaps you can use one of them. And I like what you put there, Vic. You can learn from experience, good or bad. Good or bad experiences will bring you a lesson. One of my favorite acronyms is LLE, Life's Learning Experiences. And, in fact, that's going to be showcased when we get to the end. And I'll fast forward to you, remind you that I've still got coming up tomorrow, my Masters of Change, Embracing Successes Challenge will come up tomorrow. And if you see challenge is just change with an LLE in the middle, CHALLE, Life's Learning Experiences. And so that's what Vic just said. The experiences can make a difference in our life. So you have to make sure that you learn from your experiences. And what can you do to find those positive experiences that you can share with others? That becomes the key. So he goes on to say, armed with these 3 passages, because he said those are the passages that help him fight temptations, I have the courage to endure the temptation that I am facing. The Bible also offers some practical suggestions to help someone resist temptation. Prayer in Matthew 26 and 41. Personal spiritual discipline, Hebrews 12:4-7. The Word of God, Matthew 4:4. We see these practices exercised in people like Job, Daniel, Jesus, and Paul, all who resisted various temptations that they faced in their lives. So you can listen to the broadcast again and write down some of those scriptural parts, because yes, most people don't really read the Bible, but there's a God, you don't have to read the Bible as much as find ways to learn from the Bible and understand the Bible, and don't just rely on your pastor to read it only. Your greatest gift to your pastor is to confirm what he or she says about scripture. So when they say, and this is such and such a scripture, and you say, yeah, that's right, I know that scripture, and I do get that message now. That's your biggest help to them. They don't want you to just strictly have no idea what's going on in the Bible until you hear them say it. Okay, so that's what you want to do. And so those are some examples. And so let's move on. So testing is, he gave a quote. Um, Testing is defined this way: the means through which the genuineness of faith is proved and Christian character developed. God promises to help his people during times of testing. That's from his friend Martin Manser in the article. Okay, just to remind us, because now we just talked about temptations and how to overcome it. And now let's go back to test and close it out with this, because this is what testing it is. It's a means through genuineness of faith. See, so you have to have faith when you're being tested, because you will be tested. And so Martin Manser goes on to say that God allows his people to pass through certain experiences so that he may see and prove to them that their faith in him is genuine. Don't you, when you see yourself go through something, you say, and haven't you said, nothing but God? That was all God. See, that's you going through something and you seeing, you know what? Yeah, this was my faith and belief in God. Believers sometimes doubt God and test him to see if he is true to his word. But this is forbidden in scripture. We know for sure that God allows faith to be tested, but this is not the same thing as temptation. So God allows your faith to be tested, but this is not the same as him tempting you to do evil. Testing proves faith to be genuine. 1 Peter 1, 6 through 7. Testing grows our character as Jesus's followers. James 1, 2 through 4. And testing purifies us as belonging only to God. Zechariah 13 and 9. So see the difference between testing and temptations. And faith remains strong. Yes, Vic, faith remains strong when it's tested, but it has to be tested. It's a wonderful thing, because like I always tell people, motivation comes from within. I love it that you may enjoy my message, but it's what you decide to do with the message that makes all the difference in the world. So make sure that you grow your faith from within. So here's some examples of God's testing in the Bible. Abraham was tested. Abraham is told to sacrifice Isaac. Genesis 22, 1 through 2, and then 9 through 12. God tested Israel in the desert with the wandering. Deuteronomy 8, 2 through 5. God reduced Gideon's army. Judges 7, 1 through 8. That was where he told him, look, you got too many soldiers. Cut it down to 300. So when you beat these people who are outnumbering you, you'll see that it wasn't based on you having bigger numbers. It was based on your faith in God. Job proves that God's testing is real in Job 1 and 22. Daniel 1, 8 through 21. Daniel, if you remember in the next example, shows Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which is Daniel 16 through 27. But Shadrach was the name that Nebuchadnezzar gave Daniel, and because he gave the captives different names to go along with his religion. And so their faith was tested, and they made sure that they moved on. And then finally, Jesus delays going to Bethany when Lazarus is ill. That was a test of faith, and it showed for everybody else. That's in John 11, 1 through 6. While we are never certain about how our testing, we got a comment there, Roger Carroll, without a test that you pass, how would you know what God can do? And that's what faith. So faith is your passing grade. So you got to have that faith. You have those tests so that you can see, wow, I did it. And you might not feel great about it while you're in it. Not everybody does. But step back. Remember, have you ever heard me say, step back and take a look at your work? Life is about going from one test to another. You're always going to have some new trial or tribulation, but you can get the testimony from it. So step back and give yourself credit for the tests that you've passed. And you don't have to have monumental tests, like the way you see somebody else have. What are some small things that you've overcome? Give yourself credit, because that's really what it's all about, making sure that we know that we passed the test. And so, as the article goes on to say, as I close out the article, while we are never certain about how our testing will come, right there with what you're saying, Roger Carroll, we know that it's inevitable. The testing will come, whether it's through difficult circumstances, discouraging people, or persecution. Every believer will one day face a test of faith. God makes several promises concerning our testing. Here are three that I love. And this is again Pastor um, Chris Bass. He says, one, the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials. That's 2 Peter 2:9. Two, but I, Jesus, have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. That's Luke 22:32. And finally, consider it a great joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you experience various trials, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing. James 1:2-4. So those are some ways of being tested that he enjoys going through to show how faith has endured. Another thought he offers he often has concerning testing and trials is about what Jesus endured. Christ held up under some of the most difficult testings. Whenever we face challenges, we are sharing in the suffering of Jesus. 1 Peter 4:12-13. And that thought makes it easier to endure. Of course, whether it is temptation or testing, we should always be seeking God in prayer for help to overcome, as in Peter 1, 1 Peter 4:4-19. So, inclusion to his article. So, what can we say? Temptation comes from ungodly sources. So, right back to the proof. Temptation comes from, what was my opening paragraph I read? It said, temptation comes from ungodly sources. And are designed to cause believers to fall away from their relationship with God. Testing, on the other hand, comes from God and is designed to help you or show you your dependence on God, as well as bring you closer to Him. Could you be tempted in your testing? Sure, but that's not from God. If you are tempted, He gives you all you need to endure or escape it. That's 1 Corinthians 10:13. So recognize that you have continuously passed the test and you have overcome temptation. Give yourself credit. And what I do is I attach that to one of my affirmations, and my affirmation for test is trust and embrace spiritual trials. If you were to re-listen to this broadcast, you'd hear that that's what we were talking about all the time, is spiritual trials. So trust and embrace. Know that God is going to help you pull through. When you're finished with all the temptations, though they may endure, you can recognize and appreciate the testimonies as they come in the morning. Weeping will endure, but in the morning, the sun will shine. So go through the temptations and recognize that you can overcome them. And then appreciate the testimonies that you get from each and every one. That's from my book, Affirmations. Remember, affirmations are acronyms that can be used as affirmations. And you can get your book of affirmations at sportyking.com anytime you want, as well as any of my other 7 books to keep you up and inspired. And as I mentioned in my spoiler alert, tomorrow will be my final day of my Masters of Change Embracing Successes Challenge series on Zoom. And what I've done is showed how change is important to seeing how we define change impacts how we define success. And we take each letter of the word change and we give it an affirmation. We give it an acronym or a definition. And then we break that down and show how it impacts our success. So we've already done C for choices, H for hardships, A for accomplishments, N for negotiations, G for guidance. And so tomorrow we'll be doing the E for empathy and close it out. So even if you haven't been with us the whole time, you won't feel lost, because we keep it in the moment. And I like to thank those of you who have registered and will be on the call with us tomorrow, and remind those of you who haven't that you still can register. So just get in there and come on and Zoom with us, and let's see how we're all masters of change embracing challenge is success. Thank you for joining me on Glue Monday. I want you to have a wonderful gluish week. Let me see if there's anything I need to answer in live time. And I think not. I think we're all good. So we've had another good another good reading, folks. And I want you to know that staying calm is important right now as we begin. The political season has begun. I didn't ignore Vic's comment, but the thing is that the season has begun, and now is it really important for us to uh, measure our words, be open to hearing what's being said, because you never know. There's some people who are swing votes that wouldn't they're going to be closed to the sense you can talk to them if they see that you're too one-sided. So help people listen to you by talking about the issues and making them clear. There's again why you have to choose your messages carefully, so that when you deliver, it'll be delivered well. So I'm looking forward to actually watching the Republican um, conference and seeing how that compared to the Democrats last week. And and that's, I think that hopefully, if you're a swing voter, if you're someone on the bubble, maybe seeing the difference will help you make your choice. But we have to be open to that. So I'm biased to what I saw last week. I don't see it possibly being top, but I'm open to it being top because I'm looking for the substance. So that's what we all want to remember to do: look for the substance, and recognize that what you're doing as you look for the substance is you're comparing it to what you've already accepted, and what you'd like to see come from it. If you see what you'd like to see, that can encourage you to go forward and give your support. Everybody has an opinion. Let's not let any disagreements cause conflict with the people in our lives. So I give that warning kind of message, and like I said, not hiding who I'm supporting, the Democratic ticket, but I think it's important that if we're really supporting the ticket, then we're supporting the fact that we are all human beings, and we want to respect one another's opinion and not let it lead to any kind of violence or senseless actions toward one another, because violence begets violence. Okay, so get your test, get your get your testimony, and get yourself out there. Start having a good week. Thanks for joining me. Over and out. Ciao.